Tell me this is a joke.
It isn't.
She's our maid.
Maya, now start talking. I didn't know he was going to do this. What aren't you telling us? The truth is, your husband spent years preparing for this day. Then explain why our father trusted you more than his own children.
At her husband's funeral, Evelyn Carter stood perfectly still as the final words were spoken over the polished mahogany coffin. The church was filled with familiar faces, business associates, distant relatives, and longtime friends who now spoke in lowered voices, as if grief had softened their history. But Evelyn wasn't listening. Her eyes were fixed on a sealed envelope she had been handed just minutes earlier by the family attorney. Her name was written across it in careful handwriting, but the way it was delivered felt unsettling. No explanation. No warning. Just silence, and a look that lingered a second too long. Inside that envelope was something that would fracture everything she believed about her marriage. Because when the reading of the will began, Evelyn Carter, the wife of over 3 decades, was not named where she expected to be. Not even close. Instead, the attorney's voice introduced a beneficiary that made the entire room shift uncomfortably in their seats. A name that didn't belong to the family tree. A name that belonged to someone who had always stood in the background of their lives, unnoticed, unheard, and underestimated. And in that moment, something quietly collapsed. Because the most disturbing part wasn't just who inherited everything. It was the fact that her husband, Jonathan Carter, had clearly prepared for the reaction long before his death. Almost as if he had studied every possible outcome and chosen this one with precision. The question that now pressed heavily against Evelyn's mind wasn't just why would he do this, but how long had this decision been hiding inside their home without her knowing? And more unsettling still, who else had been aware of it before she was? Before we go further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We always love hearing from you. And if you're new here, consider subscribing so you never miss stories like this. The central mystery was not complicated, but it was unbearable. Why would Jonathan Carter, a man who built his empire carefully over decades, quietly redirect his entire estate away from his own wife and children? What kind of relationship existed behind closed doors that no one in the family fully understood? And how did someone who barely spoke above a whisper inside their home end up as the sole heir to everything he owned? Because the heir was not a business partner. Not a lawyer. Not a blood relative. It was the maid. Her name was Maya Thompson. And the moment her name echoed through the courtroom, the silence that followed felt heavier than grief itself. To understand how everything unraveled, you have to go back before the funeral. Before the will was read. Before suspicion settled into the Carter household like something that refused to leave. Jonathan Carter was known as a disciplined man. A private real estate investor with holdings spread across multiple states, the kind of wealth that never needed attention to grow. To the public, he was composed, intelligent, and careful with every word. But inside his home, he was distant in ways his family never fully understood, present physically, but often elsewhere mentally, as if carrying conversations no one else could hear. His wife, Evelyn, had spent most of her life inside the controlled rhythm. Their marriage was never loud or dramatic. It was structured, morning coffee at the same time, business calls that dictated the household schedule, dinners that followed routine rather than emotion. Over time, Evelyn stopped questioning the silence that filled the spaces between them. She simply learned how to live inside it. Their 2 children, Daniel Carter and Olivia Carter, grew up under the same structure. Daniel followed closely in his father's professional footsteps, constantly chasing approval that never seemed fully satisfied. Olivia, on the other hand, drifted away early, describing the family home as too quiet to feel like a home at all. And then there was Maya Thompson. She arrived at the Carter estate just over 4 years before Jonathan's death. At first, she was only a housemaid, quiet, respectful, almost invisible in the way she moved through the house. She never interrupted conversations. Never imposed herself on the family's space. She simply worked, cleaned, and observed, leaving everything more orderly than she found it. Evelyn barely noticed her at first. A polite greeting here and there. A thank you in passing. Nothing more. But Jonathan noticed differently. At first, it was small things, asking about her background, how she managed to stay so composed under pressure, what she planned for her future. Evelyn thought nothing of it. Jonathan had always been observant. Curious in a detached, intellectual way. But over time, those conversations changed in tone and frequency. They became longer, more intentional, and more private. That was the first moment Evelyn felt something she couldn't immediately explain. Not suspicion. Not yet. Just distance forming where there had never been distance before. At night, she would sometimes pass the kitchen and see them still awake. Jonathan sitting at the table, calm and focused. Maya standing nearby, hands folded, speaking softly. Nothing about it looked inappropriate. Nothing obvious enough to accuse. But something about the dynamic felt shifted. Like two people discussing things that didn't belong in the rest of the house. When Evelyn once asked Jonathan about it, he responded without hesitation. She understands patterns people ignore, he said. That's rare. It should have ended there. But it didn't. Because after that, changes began appearing in quiet ways. Legal documents were reorganized. Financial files were moved into private storage. Jonathan began meeting his attorney alone more frequently. Conversations that used to involve Evelyn were now happening behind closed doors. And Maya's role slowly expanded. From housemaid to assistant in small administrative tasks. Organizing files. Receiving deliveries. Handling messages when no one else was available. Her presence became less invisible with time, even if she still said very little. No one questioned it openly. Until the night everything changed. Jonathan collapsed unexpectedly in his study. No long illness. No warning signs that anyone recognized. Just a sudden moment where everything stopped working at once. Emergency services arrived, but there was nothing they could reverse. And just like that, the structure of the Carter household shifted forever. But what no one realized yet was this. Jonathan Carter had already begun rewriting everything long before that night. And Maya Thompson was already written into it. The Carter estate had always carried a certain stillness after Jonathan's death, but the morning of the will reading felt different. Heavier. Not because of grief alone, but because something in the air suggested that what was about to be revealed had been prepared long before anyone was ready to hear it. Evelyn Carter arrived at the attorney's office wearing the same composed expression she had worn at the funeral, but inside, her thoughts were unsettled in ways she refused to admit. Daniel walked beside her in silence, his jaw tight, while Olivia kept her distance, staring out the window as if she already expected disappointment from whatever came next. The attorney, Mr. Harold Winslow, had served the Carter family for over 15 years. A man known for precision, control, and emotional detachment in professional matters. But even he seemed slightly slower in his movements that morning, as though aware that what he was about to read would not be easily absorbed. He placed a thick folder on the table, adjusted his glasses, and began without unnecessary words. The first part of the will was expected: minor assets, standard distributions, routine legal language. Daniel received his assigned business shares. Olivia was given a trust fund and property allocation. Evelyn expected her name to appear next as the primary spouse beneficiary. It did not. Instead, Harold paused. Just briefly. A pause so small it almost went unnoticed, but not by Evelyn. Then he continued reading, and the structure of everything she believed in began to shift. All remaining assets, including the Carter estate residence, investment holdings, and controlling interest in Carter Holdings Group, are to be transferred in full ownership to Maya Thompson. The room did not react immediately. It took a moment for the words to settle into meaning. And when they did not feel real. Daniel was the first to speak, his voice sharp with disbelief. That's not possible. You're saying the maid inherits everything. Olivia let out a short, disbelieving laugh, as if it was a mistake that would be corrected any second. But Evelyn didn't move. She didn't speak. Her hands stayed folded on her lap, but her breathing had changed. Controlled, slower, as if she was forcing her body to remain still while her thoughts started breaking apart the logic of what she had just heard. Harold continued, carefully. There is also a written instruction from Mr. Jonathan Carter. It states clearly that this decision is intentional, legally binding, and made without coercion or external influence. That last line changed everything. Because it removed the easiest explanation: mistake, fraud, or manipulation. Jonathan had anticipated that reaction. He had built a defense around it before anyone could challenge it. And that was when Evelyn finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "Read it again." But the answer did not change. Maya Thompson. The maid. The woman who had lived quietly inside their home for years without ever claiming importance. And now, the sole heir to everything. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was fractured. Daniel pushed back his chair abruptly. Olivia shook her head repeatedly, as if refusing to accept reality through repetition alone. Evelyn, however, remained seated, her eyes fixed on the document as if she could force it to reveal something it was hiding. But beneath her composure, questions were already forming. Not just about the will itself, but about the years leading up to it. Because something about Jonathan's wording was deliberate. Too precise. Too structured. This wasn't a sudden decision made near the end of life. It was constructed. Layered. Protected. And that meant one thing. Someone else had known. On the drive back to the estate, no one spoke. The silence in the car felt different now. Not the silence of grief, but the silence of suspicion beginning to take shape. Daniel finally broke it halfway home, his voice low but tense. There's no way he did this without reason. Someone influenced him. Olivia responded immediately, or someone took advantage of him when he was vulnerable. But Evelyn didn't join the speculation. Instead, she kept replaying the attorney's tone, the phrasing of the document, the precision of every clause. Because Jonathan had not sounded confused in his final instructions. He had sounded certain. Back at the estate, Maya Thompson was nowhere to be seen. Her absence was immediate and noticeable, as if she had already understood what was coming and chosen distance before confrontation arrived. The staff said she had taken the morning off, something she rarely did. That detail alone unsettled Evelyn more than she expected. Because it suggested awareness. Preparation. Possibly even expectation. That evening, Evelyn went into Jonathan's study alone for the first time since his death. The room still carried his presence in a way that felt too structured to be natural. Nothing was out of place. Everything remained as he left it. But now she was looking at it differently. Every drawer, every file, every locked cabinet felt like it might contain an answer she had missed for years. And that was when she noticed something she had overlooked before. A small section of the bookshelf that did not align properly. Slightly recessed. Almost hidden in plain sight. Behind it, a sealed compartment. And inside that compartment were documents that were never included in the official will. Evelyn's hands hesitated before touching them. Because at that moment, she realized something unsettling. Jonathan Carter had not simply changed his will. He had built a second one. And Maya Thompson's name was not an accident. It was part of a plan no one in the family had been prepared to understand. Evelyn Carter did not sleep that night. She sat alone in Jonathan's study long after the rest of the estate had gone quiet, the sealed documents still resting in her hands like something fragile and dangerous at the same time. The room felt unchanged, yet everything about it now carried a second meaning. Every object looked like it might be connected to something she had never been invited to understand. And the most unsettling part was not the inheritance itself, it was the realization that Jonathan had prepared for her discovery of these documents. They were not hidden in panic. They were placed with intention, almost as if he knew exactly when she would find them. The first document was a supplementary legal directive, dated nearly a year before his death. It confirmed what the attorney had read aloud, but with additional instructions that were not shared publicly. It stated that Maya Thompson was not only to inherit the estate, but also to assume control over the Carter Holdings Group immediately, without delay or family intervention. There was a clause that Evelyn had to read twice before she accepted it was real. Any attempt by family members to contest the will would result in a legal freeze of all their current financial access until the matter was resolved in court. Jonathan had not just made a decision, he had fortified it against resistance. Daniel and Olivia reacted exactly as expected the next morning when Evelyn finally told them what she found. Daniel's frustration turned into disbelief, then anger. Olivia insisted the documents must have been manipulated after Jonathan's death. But Evelyn did not respond emotionally. She was no longer reacting like a grieving wife. She was analyzing like someone trying to reconstruct a pattern. Because one thing no one could ignore was consistency. Jonathan's legal language was precise, consistent across every document, and carefully structured over time. That kind of preparation did not happen in a week or even a month. It required planning, observation, and deliberate choice. And Maya Thompson was at the center of it. But Maya remained absent from the estate for 2 more days. When she finally returned, she did not enter through the front entrance. She used the side staff corridor, as she always had. She was dressed simply, her presence calm, her expression unreadable. But something about her demeanor had changed. Not in confidence or arrogance, but in distance. As if she already understood she was no longer part of the household structure, but something outside of it entirely. Evelyn approached her in the hallway before she could retreat into the staff quarters. "I need to ask you something," Evelyn said, her voice controlled but firm. Maya stopped. She did not look surprised. She simply turned slightly, waiting. "You knew about this," Evelyn continued. "About the will. About everything." For a moment, Maya did not answer. And in that silence, Evelyn noticed something unsettling, not fear, not guilt, but restraint. Like someone carefully choosing what they were allowed to say. "I didn't know everything," Maya replied quietly. "But I knew he was preparing something long before anyone else did." That answer did not provide relief. It created more questions. Because it confirmed awareness. Not involvement, but proximity. Jonathan had not made these decisions in isolation. Someone had been close enough to observe the process without being fully included in it. That evening, Evelyn made a decision that would change the direction of everything. She began reviewing Jonathan's private records systematically. Financial logs, correspondence archives, and attorney communication summaries. What she found was not a single moment of decision, but a timeline. Over 18 months, Jonathan had been gradually restructuring ownership, shifting assets, and modifying legal authority in increments so small they would not appear suspicious individually. But together, they formed a pattern that pointed to preparation for a complete separation from his existing inheritance structure. And Maya's name appeared repeatedly, not in ownership transfers, but in consultation notes, scheduling entries, and private advisory meetings. Not as a beneficiary, but as a participant in discussions. That realization shifted everything again. Because it suggested Maya Thompson was not just a passive recipient of wealth. She was someone Jonathan had actively involved in the process. Daniel, however, was not willing to accept that nuance. His focus shifted to confrontation. He began asking staff questions aggressively, trying to reconstruct Maya's movements inside the household. Olivia followed a different approach, watching Maya silently, trying to interpret behavior for signs of manipulation or deception. But neither approach produced clarity. Instead, the household began dividing into invisible sides. And Maya noticed. One evening, she confronted Evelyn again, but this time her tone was different, more direct, but still controlled. "This isn't about me," Maya said. "You're all looking for a reason to make it about me. But that won't change what he decided." Evelyn stepped closer. "Then explain it. Why would he leave everything to you?" Maya hesitated longer this time. And when she finally spoke, her voice carried something carefully contained. "Because he believed you wouldn't understand what he was trying to protect." That statement hung in the air long after Maya walked away. Protect. Not reward. Not affection. Not betrayal. Protection. And for the first time, Evelyn began considering a possibility she had been avoiding entirely. What if Jonathan Carter hadn't been changing his will because of Maya, but because of something he feared? Something inside the family itself. That night, Evelyn returned to Jonathan's hidden compartment again. But this time, she noticed something she had missed before. A final envelope, thinner than the others, sealed separately. No label. No markings. Inside it was a single instruction written in Jonathan's handwriting. "If you are reading this, then the truth has already started to divide the house. Do not look at Maya as the cause. Look at what she was placed near." Evelyn's hands tightened slightly as she read the line again. Placed near. That phrase did not feel accidental. It felt intentional. And for the first time, Evelyn stopped asking why Maya inherited everything. and started asking what Maya had been standing too close to all along. Evelyn Carter did not move for a long time after reading Jonathan's final instruction. If you are reading this, then the truth has already started to divide the house. Those words did not feel like a warning anymore. They felt like confirmation. Not of what had already happened, but of what Jonathan had expected to happen. He had not simply rewritten his will. He had engineered a response pattern inside his own family, knowing exactly how each person would react when control was removed from their hands. Evelyn sat in the dim light of the study, the final sealed envelope resting in front of her, untouched for several minutes. Something about it made her hesitate more than anything before it. Not fear of what it contained, but fear of what it would confirm about the men she had spent over 30 years beside. When she finally opened it, there was only one sheet of paper. No legal language. No formal structure. Just Jonathan's handwriting. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and the version of me you believed you knew is already incomplete in your memory. Evelyn's breath slowed as she continued reading. I did not change my will because I lost trust in you. I changed it because I understood what would happen after I was gone. Wealth does not corrupt people suddenly. It reveals what has already been forming quietly for years. Her eyes tightened slightly at that line. Then came the part that shifted everything. Maya Thompson is not a stranger to this family. She was not hired by accident, and she was not chosen randomly. She was placed here intentionally after I discovered something that could not be ignored. Evelyn stopped reading for a moment. Placed. Again that word. Jonathan continued in the letter. 2 years before my death, I began reviewing internal financial irregularities inside Carter Holdings. At first, they were small inconsistencies. Nothing alarming on their own. But together, they formed a pattern that pointed inward, toward people already close to me. Evelyn's hands tightened slightly around the paper. I needed someone inside the house who would not be seen as a threat. Someone who would observe without being acknowledged. Maya was not just working for us. She was placed near me so I could see who felt comfortable revealing their true intentions in her presence. The room felt quieter after that sentence. Evelyn's mind immediately went back to every moment Maya had been in the background of conversations, every time she had been present but ignored, every detail no one thought mattered. Jonathan had not been building trust with Maya for emotional reasons. He had been using her presence as a mirror for others. Then came the final revelation. I discovered attempts to gradually redirect control of assets long before my health declined. Not from outsiders. From within the family structure itself. I will not name them here. You already know who they are. Evelyn stopped reading completely. Her mind didn't need names. It had already started connecting patterns she had ignored for years. Daniel's increasing involvement in financial decisions. Olivia's unexplained withdrawals from certain family trusts under pretense of independence. Small inconsistencies in reporting that had once seemed like administrative errors. None of them individually proved anything. Together, they formed something else. A direction. A pressure point. A motive that had been growing quietly inside the family long before Jonathan ever wrote his final will. And Maya had been positioned at the center of it, not as an heir chosen out of affection, but as protection. A safeguard. Someone who could hold control temporarily until the truth was exposed in a way no one could easily destroy. Evelyn finally understood why Jonathan had structured everything the way he did. The inheritance was never about wealth. It was about forcing transparency. And Maya was the only person outside the family structure who could not be easily influenced by internal loyalty or inherited entitlement. That evening, Evelyn found Maya outside near the edge of the estate gardens. She wasn't celebrating. She wasn't behaving like someone who had gained everything. She was sitting quietly, as if waiting for something she knew would eventually come. Evelyn approached her slowly and handed her the letter. Maya read it without speaking. Her expression didn't change dramatically, but something subtle shifted in her posture. A quiet acknowledgement, not of surprise, but of understanding finally being confirmed. He never told me everything, Maya said softly. But I knew I wasn't here by chance. Evelyn studied her. Why did you stay? Maya paused before answering. Because he told me one thing clearly. If the truth ever came out, I would need to be the one still standing here when it did. Silence followed. Not heavy. Not tense. Just final in a way that made everything before it feel like preparation. The Carter family wealth did not simply change ownership that year. It changed meaning. What had once been seen as legacy became a record of hidden tension, unspoken decisions, and truths that had been delayed too long to remain invisible. Daniel eventually withdrew from legal challenges after reviewing the full private records. Olivia left the estate entirely within weeks. And Evelyn remained, not as someone trying to reclaim what was lost, but as someone finally understanding what had been unfolding long before she noticed it. And Maya Thompson. She did not replace Jonathan Carter. She replaced the silence he left behind. Because in the end, the inheritance was never the real story. The real story was what Jonathan had been protecting all along, and who he needed standing in the center of it when everything finally came to light. Sometimes, the people who appear to receive everything are not the ones who benefited the most, but the ones left standing in the middle of what others refused to see. And the question Jonathan Carter left behind was never answered in court documents or legal filings. It was left in the minds of everyone who heard it. When wealth changes hands, does it reveal truth or create it? And maybe that is the part of Jonathan Carter's story that lingers the most, not the wealth, not the will, not even the shocking decision that placed Maya Thompson at the center of everything, but the silence he deliberately left behind for others to interpret. Because in the end, Evelyn was forced to sit with a question that no legal document could fully answer. Was Jonathan protecting his family from each other, or was he finally revealing who they had always been when no one was watching? And Maya? She never celebrated. She never claimed victory. She simply stood in the space he left her in, carrying a responsibility no one had prepared her for, while the Carter family quietly unraveled around the truth they could no longer avoid. So now the question turns to you. If you were in Evelyn's position, would you accept Jonathan's decision as protection, or would you see it as betrayal hidden inside planning? And do you believe Maya was chosen to inherit wealth, or chosen to expose something the family never wanted uncovered? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read them. And if this story kept you watching until the end, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you think, and it tells me you want more stories like this. Because tomorrow, I'm bringing you another story even more unsettling, even more emotional, and even more unpredictable than this one. One that will make you question what you think you know about trust, family, and hidden intentions. Stay tuned.